Welcome to the SailPoint Identity Security Solutions Show, the one place you go to learn about SailPoint's products, solutions, and portfolios. My name is James Honey, and joining me today is Grady Slane, Senior Manager of Product Management. Grady, so happy you're here with us.
I'm really happy to be here too. Thanks,
awesome.
James.
Well, obviously we're at Navigate. It's an exciting time this week, and I'm so excited to have you on because we're going to talk about our top announcement at this year's Navigate, which is around machine identity security. So you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
So Grady, let's start digging into about machine identities.
All right.
So how are security teams adapting to the shift to more machine identities as automation and AI technologies become more widespread?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the important thing to keep in mind is that this growth in automation and AI technologies is really just a continuation of a trend that we've been seeing for a long time,
right?
Particularly in the workplace, and that is the digitization of work.
Yep.
So if we look at something we all know well, something like service accounts, right?
Right.
They've been around for a long time, but we're seeing more servers, more databases, more applications using service accounts than ever before.
Right.
And next year we're going to see even more than we're seeing this year.
Yeah.
And this is because companies are, have an insatiable appetite for greater and greater levels of automation, right?
Yeah.
So this is only going to continue. Yeah. Thinking about AI technologies specifically, it probably already feels like these tools are starting to transform the ways that we work.
Yes.
But we are genuinely like at the beginning of this trend, right? We're using things like assistants now more than ever, chatbots and things like that. But that's only one type of AI technology, right? We're also going to see a growth in things like agents, which are more autonomous type AI technologies, less of an assistive experience. As this technology matures, and that itself is only going to drive greater and greater use of machine identities in organizations and a need to govern these things.
Yeah.
Now, the question really was around how are security teams adapting? It kind of sounds obvious, but the big thing that they're starting to recognize is that they themselves need to adapt first and foremost, right? Most security teams, if they've been managing machine accounts at all, they've been basically doing this off the side of their desk. They've been using spreadsheets, they've been using CMDBs, Active Directory, et cetera.
Right.
And those tools might have been barely holding on up to this point, but as these teams look at towards the future, and a future where the number of machine identities not only starts to rival the number of human identities, employees that are managed in an organization, but actually starts to exceed that, they're starting to really come to terms with the fact that the old ways just aren't going to scale. Yeah. It's really a tipping point.
Absolutely. So, and you were kind of talking about machine identities becoming more than human identities. So what challenges do organizations typically face when managing machine identities, and how did these evolve over time?
Yeah, this is a good one. We really have identified 4 big challenges that organizations struggle with as they start to take machine identity seriously. The first one is really just keeping track of all these things. And this really is the first big hurdle for many organizations. So when we look at organizations that are starting to deal with this, right, they kind of fall into 2 categories. The most mature organizations out there, they might be using something like a CMDB or some type of in-house built application to try and track and manage these things. Yeah. But that's pretty rare, actually. The vast majority of organizations, again, are trying to, brute force this. They're trying to get by using things like spreadsheets, and really that just tends to be the Wild West.
Yes.
You don't have a really solid way of tracking these things using those types of antiquated tools. And as a result, for most organizations, they don't have a clear idea of exactly how many machine accounts or identities they even have in their org.
Right.
And when you can't track something, you can't govern it.
Exactly.
Right? So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second big challenge that we see is one of organization. Yeah. Right? So very large companies, organizations, they could have tens of thousands of machine accounts and identities within their organization, thousands upon thousands, right? Right. They almost never want to manage these things on an account-by-account basis. Right. That's not efficient. It's not scale. Yeah, it's too much, right? Exactly. Yeah. So their strong preference is to, where it makes sense, logically group these machine accounts into identities and govern those identities instead. Right. That's a little bit more scalable, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that using these antiquated tools, there really isn't a good mechanism in place for actually grouping these machine accounts into identities and governing those identities instead.
Right.
So that's the second big challenge. The third one has to do with ownership, right? And this probably doesn't, I mean, I think it's something that we all know. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but identity security is really a team sport in any large organization, right?
Yeah.
So you've got your identity administrators and they're the coaches, right? They're the ones running the plays or, setting the plays up. But without the players, the application owners and the frontline managers in particular, if they're not running the plays, if they're not active in the process, if they're not being deliberate as they do things like access request reviews and certifications, you're not going to have the people with the best context, the people closest to the problem, making smart decisions around how these things should be used.
Right.
With machine identities, it is the exact same problem and the same need, right? But what's interesting is, while I think we all recognize this, when you don't have good tracking of these machine accounts and identities, it also means you typically don't have good ownership of these things as well.
Exactly.
And we have data that suggests that basically 75% of machine accounts in most organizations do not have a designated owner today.
That's
and so if you don't have owners, you're not going to govern these things.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And then the last challenge, the fourth big one, it really has to do with just keeping these things up to date and regularly reviewed. And that really just, it's about applying the same well-established governance processes that you have built out and applied to your human identities, your employees, to your machine identities, and just keeping that up. So how's that evolved? Which is really that's a lot of challenges, right? But again, because of the nature of these challenges, it's not really possible anymore to try and do this, again, off the side of one's desk using the old techniques like spreadsheets. Right. So, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to ask. So with that, I think you're kind of leading into the next piece of the conversation that we were going to talk about is managing machine identities different from managing human identities?
It is different in a few really key ways, right?
Yeah.
I'll talk about one particular example that I think is truly separates machine identities from human identities. So, when you think about a human identity, a human isn't something that materializes out of nowhere within an organization, right? So when a new employee joins an organization, they have to be hired, they have to be onboarded. What's perhaps most important in the context of governance is that they have to be added to an HR source of record, right? That is the source of truth, right?
Right.
And so when you're managing employees, you never really have uncertainty around how many humans or how many employees do I have in my organization at any one time. There is a single source of truth. That isn't the case with machine identities. And it's because these machine identities and these machine accounts can be created in any number of different applications and sources.
Right.
And as a result of that, you never really have a single source of truth to tell you how many there are within an organization, right? And so that necessitates a new process when you're actually governing machine identities that you don't have to do with human identities, called discovery and classification.
Right.
You actually have to be deliberate about chasing these machine accounts and identities down across all these sources. Otherwise, you're not going to even know which ones you have within your organization. So that's one aspect of it. There are minor implications as well. So as a result of not having a single source of truth, your machine identity security offering might actually be your source of truth for machine accounts and identities, right? But it's for these reasons and others, and I think I've covered the big one, that most identity professionals, 72% of them actually find it more difficult to govern machine identities than it is to govern human identities.
I can definitely see that. So I'm gonna pivot a little bit and let's talk about risk. Because obviously we've talked about governing the machine identities, the struggles of just understanding how many you have and everything else. So what are some potential risks if an organization neglects what you were just talking about securing these machine identities effectively?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious risk is that there's some type of incident, right? That notably like a machine account getting compromised or a machine identity getting
Right.
compromised. And that can lead to any number of things, data breaches, for example, or worse. I think most professionals know this, that this is always a possibility, that this can happen, right? What I don't think that most folks, and including most of our listeners today, know is that 83% of organizations have actually had a machine account takeover in the past year.
Wow.
Right? So over 4 out of 5 organizations, right? And when you start thinking about the nature of some of these machine identities and just how privileged they are, how much access they have to internal systems, and then you marry that with the knowledge that over 4 out of 5 organizations have actually had a machine account takeover in the past year, that's the type of thing that really starts to keep you up at night.
Yeah, that becomes a big problem on that. So let's kind of try to bring it home a little bit. I think it's a lot of great information. This is why I've been wanting to get you on the show. So what steps can companies take today to improve their visibility and control over these machine identities?
Yeah. This advice is the same advice I would give to any organization, which is that we're, again, at that tipping point. It's pretty much time to start taking this seriously and to start thinking about how you can govern these things programmatically, right? The growth that we've seen in machine accounts and identities over the past few years, and the growth that we're going to see in the coming years, necessitates a new way of doing things. The old ways, trying to do things through CMDBs, Active Directory, et cetera, are not going to scale to the problem.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to manage these things, at least not with any kind of degree of integrity using the old ways. Right. Now, for organizations that are actively looking at a solution for managing their machine accounts and identities, the advice that I would give them is that they should think about the intersection of managing those machine identities with managing their human identities. So the kind of questions that I think that they should consider asking are things like, how important are shared user experience paradigms between my identity security tool and the tool I plan on using for machine identities? What is the tolerance for training within my organization? Do I have a budget for actually getting my employees, my users that are going to have to use this tool, up to speed on a new tool? Is there existing knowledge or experience around a particular tool in the ecosystem already, right? So, the most important thing is that a dedicated solution gets adopted, right? And for some organizations, they're going to find that having a completely separate experience for managing machine identities versus employees or human identities is right for them. But accounting for some of the considerations that I just shared with you, I think that most organizations are going to find that the benefits of using an integrated solution are quite compelling.
And I think that's why we have machine identity security that we announced this week. I think it is just, you highlighted some key points about a lot of the things that you do for your human identities. You have to do those for your machine identities. And then more. I mean, figure out those owners, figure out what accounts those are, and everything else. Grady, thank you so much for joining us. This is an exciting topic. I know not just for us, but for our customers and for people listening. So thanks again for joining us.
James, thanks for having me.
Anytime. Definitely gonna bring you back.
Looking forward to it.
We've already talked about it. And I want to thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about machine identity security or anything else we talked about, join us at www.sailpoint.com. Thank you.